views, opinions, and responsibility of this particular podcast are not endorsed, condoned, or substantiated by Soul Cry Church, the pastor, or any church affiliates. This train wreck is done at the sole discretion of the hands of Drake Drakey himself, and his views, opinions, and expressions are of his own reconnaissance. And now, with a severe lack of sleep, it's your boy, Drake Drakey.
So, I'm going to be brief. And when I say brief, it's probably going to be a half hour. But I'm calling this episode The Retreat that I retreated from. And the retreat was Friday, so it's still current. But my church, Soul Cry Church, have been talking a while about having a men's retreat. They've been saying it for months. They have a men's retreat from Friday to Saturday. And over all these months, different church members would come up to me and ask, hey, you gonna go to the retreat? The retreat's coming. You gonna go to the retreat? I'm like, no, you know. They say, hey, how come you gonna go to the retreat? This will be fun to retreat. We go to the retreat. Why don't you go to the retreat? And I'm like, hey, I work Fridays and Saturdays. And not only that, I work long hours a week to compensate for having a 4-day work week. But they was like, well, can't you just take off? Take those days off? Like, really? Work 2 days a week? And I was like, can't we ever have something like on a Monday or Tuesday and have everyone else take the 2 days off of work? But I know the pushback I would get. How you expect me to maintain my expenditures with a 3-day paycheck? And they're married. So either way, there's at least 2 incomes coming in. And they asking to make do on a 2-day paycheck, you know. But they kept hyping the men's retreat up for months and all, you know. The members over, they're going, they've been there before, they're going to go back. And the purpose of the church is men's retreat to me, you know, was to grow in fellowship and to walk with God and be better stewards of the faith in the word. And I agree. But then they added, you know, and to be better husbands, as no women are allowed. And I kind of expected that when you said men's retreat, you know. I wasn't expecting women or pronoun situations to arise, you know. So you leave your wives at home and it'll be a retreat and no wives are going to be there over and over. Now, if you're married, you know, that probably sounds like a vacation from nagging and having to leave the toilet seat up. But if you're single and you keep hearing that, you know, you ever see that movie, The Ladies' Man with Tim Meadows from Saturday Night Live, and his arch nemesis was Will Ferrell, and Will Ferrell's character was a guy who kept trying to get the ladies' man to do mano-a-mano wrestling with him, and how suspicious he was, you know. That's all I kept thinking when they kept saying, and no women are going to be there, you know. And I said, oh, it'll be in Pennsylvania, so it'll be outside of state lines in a remote area that might have bad cell tower coverage, so no calls will be available. And you start getting weird vibes, you know. And it may be because the world as you see it, you know, like the world as you see is not what we seek, you know. You turn to the Bible and discover verses like Psalm 34:17, you know, when the righteous cry for help, the Lord hears and delivers them out of their trouble. It's about deliverance. But the world, in contrast, just starts to make you think about the movie Deliverance and that banjo duel theme, you know. Now, every time they said it'll be in an undisclosed location in Pennsylvania, I kept hearing, hey, they used to say a mind is a terrible thing to waste, especially to your own ideologies. Because now every time, everything you hear sounds sus in your own head because of your own, you know, your own views and rationality. And, you know, the more I would hear about this, especially the name of the men's group mentioned to me, it started sounding suspicious and ominous, you know, because the name of the men's group is Mended, you know, the Mended Men's Group. So it became the Mended Men Retreat. And in church, and you feel with the Holy Spirit, you know, it sounded cool, mended. Oh, it sounded like one word. You get home and you get to reality, it starts sounding like 2 words. And you start over analyzing things. You're like, mended? Like, the men did what? And why did they have to retreat after, you know? Probably because they couldn't call the police because there was no cell towers. Man, this is allegedly some alcohol away from being a rumor Diddy party, allegedly. You would have to go back to New York to call the authorities, but now it's out of New York's jurisdiction. And last year we spoke about to bear fruit. And every good tree bears good fruit. And now there's all this talk about the men getting away from women and spend some time alone and bonding. Is like, you say bonding? Bonding, at a retreat, and I ain't gonna lie, and you hearing this, it sounds kind of fruity. I'm just saying. Hey, remember this used to be a popular song that said, "My mind is playing tricks on me." So this Sunday before the retreat, I was at church and I thought maybe I misheard it, but I saw it on the video, and Pastor Travis mentioned the Mendon's Men Retreat. And he spoke a little bit, and then he said, and the title of today's sermon is called Between Touches. Oh, hell no, that's what I'm afraid of, Keep your hands to yourself, This would be a sign, And you think I'm lying? The week before, Pastor Travis's sermon was called The Miracle of Walking Away, Part 1, The week before, it wasn't Part 2 then, last week. I guess he had to wait till the results were in, back from the retreat. But I think that was a sign for me not to go. And then, of course, it was the cost of it all. You put the money in, and you have to spend the night. And so is there like a Motel 6 nearby? But no, there's all arranged. You have rooms set and who you share a room with. Like, wait a minute. Share a room, I only know these people on Sunday, and a handful of people at that, And even my pastor was out of the country during the time, so I didn't even think he was going to be there. And first of all, my pastor, David Ham, is awesome. If you don't know, you should know. It's always amazing and enlightening experience hearing him explain the word through the Bible. Like, you feel such a fire in your soul that even the devil's uncomfortable. Which is why when you have a fiery and blessed David on stage, fueled by the Holy Spirit, teaching about Jesus, you have to have an even bigger David at the door. And we got that. And Elder Dave. The devil come to the door and be like, who in my domain is that? I'm like, that is Elder Dave. Don't mess around and find out. And I'm glad Elder Dave is head of security and all the security, because I really need all that security because I'm very insecure. And Big Dave, Elder Dave, he's powerful. If he's wearing the armor of God, it would appear like Iron Man's Hulkbuster uniform, Elder Dave is like the left tackle for Jesus. He actually got me my first opportunity to work in the church. So shout out to Elder Dave. And you can't mention Elder Dave without mentioning Big Mike from Soul Cross Security. And anyone remember 90s wrestling? Elder Dave and Big Mike are like a goatee away from being the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase and Virgil. And don't get me started on Big Mike from Soul Cross Security. He's like reverse Samson, If he ever grows a dark Caesar or fade, he won't be able to do push-ups. Strong. Too strong. He like Debo from Friday with glasses. Debo with a smile instead of a scowl. You see him, he always walks up to you and he's always seems like he's chewing gum and smiling because he's happy. Like, hello, my brother and sister. How we doing today? Like he gonna seem less intimidating because he's showing teeth, And I know you don't want to hear another round of how strong is Mike from Soul Cry Security, do you? Well, Mike from Soul Cry Security is so strong that when a mosquito bit him, it gained his superhuman strength and attacked Japan and Fort Godzilla. This super mosquito became so big and strong, Japan called it Mothra. That's how strong Mike is. They used to have those jokes that Chuck Norris is so tough and strong with his karate because he could break a brick with his hands, bare hands at that. Man, let me tell you, Mike from Soul Cry Security is so strong that he once broke a whole bunch of bricks that were connected with one hand. And luckily, the city did say that the building was abandoned before it collapsed. R.I.P. Chuck Norris, by the way. You know, that's how strong Mike from Soul Cry Security is. Mike from Soul Cry Security is so strong that when he breaks a sweat, the Liquid sued him for unnecessary roughness. Strong. Mike's so strong that when he shakes your hand, the whole world shakes. Mike from Soul Cry Security is so strong that he was struck by lightning and was happy because he was finally able to pop his eardrums. Strong. Mike from Soul Cry Security is so strong that when he was younger, the dentist told him that he might need braces. And he said, my teeth better straighten up and act right. And they listened. And Mike never needed braces. Yeah. Mike from Soul Cry Security is so strong that he doesn't even need the glasses. You know, his eyes just develop a strategic distraction to slow him down a little bit. Yeah, he's like a human steroid. In fact, steroids were invaded just so that people can compete with Mike. Mike, you work out too much. I keep telling you that. He don't believe me. You know, like, Mike, you are not supposed to see muscles on x-rays. Come on, man. But back to the retreat. I actually retreated before it even started. You know, I never did a retreat. You know, you'd have thought I was from Brownsville. You know, never ran, never will, never retreat. But I never went to a retreat, man. I don't even go to family reunions unless there's a casket. You know. And back in the day, like, my cousin Deanna was always organizing these family reunions from, like, my father's side of the family. And I don't do reunions ever. Back in the day, she used to try to get, like, my mother to get me to go to these. And back then I was like, I tell my mother, look, I'm doing comedy. I'm trying to network. I don't have time for that. So my mother said, well, maybe you could do your comedy at the family reunion. And I'm like, I had to be frank with her. I was like, look, when I'm on stage performing, I'm trying to meet women, you know. And my mother, bless her heart, innocently enough, without thinking, said, well, if you perform well, maybe you'll meet someone there. I'm like, really? She had to catch herself, but it was too late, you know. And visually, it may not seem it if you see me, but I'm quick, boy, you know. I'm quick on my feet. And I was like, really? You think I'm going to pick up a woman at my family reunion? And for all my church members, you think I'm going to find a wife at my family reunion? And my mother was all embarrassed. That's not what I meant. That's what you said. So I had to tell her, look, I don't know what kind of grandkids you were expecting to have, but I ain't going to raise a kid with a tail. I'm sorry. Hey, they had that old phrase, kissing cousins. Well, whenever kissing cousins move somewhere, they have a register with the state. Nah, you better stop. But see, the world makes you cynical like that. And to share a room with a forced roommate, you know, that you don't see but like a couple hours once a week, it makes me uncomfortable. You know? It's like growing up in the hood, you know. You hear the older OGs break down like old black man logic, you know, and they sound intelligent, you know. Hey, man, you remember, no man is ever supposed to see another man in pajamas or his feet, you know. And anyway, first of all, no single man has pajamas. And if you're just wearing sweatpants at a retreat, you already sound sus. Ain't nothing worse, you know, than going out and buying brand new pajamas to impress your new roommate, your new male roommate. You know, it's weird. You know, and you can't even bring this up without becoming Exhibit 8, Your Honor, Drake. You know. And they tell you, we're going to have to pray for you. We'll all go to your room and lay hands on you and pray for you. Like, what? Hey, none of y'all get behind me. Y'all better all be standing in front of me, you know. It's like, what's this going to become? Like the new updated sermon title now? Between unwanted touches? Yeah. And how are you spelling the word pray? Yeah. Are you with the letter A or the letter E? You know. Now, I saw them all this Sunday after the retreat, wondering to see if I see any signs of trauma and distress, but the seasons of signs and wonders, right? But they all were like acting normal, and the cynical New York side of me had me wondering how they pulled that off, you know. like at the afternoon on Saturday, for the lunch break. I don't know if they gave them like some specialized design Kool-Aid and they forgot the whole weekend. Or the handlers started, putting on those black men in black sunglasses and pulled out neuralizers and asked the audience to all look at the flash of light and gave them like a post-hypnotic suggestion. Like, and when you leave here today, you will only remember the word only, and that you had a good time bonding. And the reason you're walking funny is because you all pulled a muscle. But see, that's my fear. It's that New York mindset, New York just hardens your heart. Trust becomes a factor, When you only socialize a few hours on a Sunday, then it's always going to be a fellowship because it never could develop into a friendship. You can't just rush and force friendships for the greater good just to keep the peace due to circumstances. You want proof? A lot of husbands complain about their in-laws. Hi-yo! I mean, not around their wives, obviously, but I'm saying. But they tried to make the retreat sound fun with extracurricular activities as well. You could be able to work out and play some basketball if you want, or go swimming. And then my spider senses started going off because what's in the news recently, like the supposed drowning death of Nolan Wells, young African-American teenager. Nolan Wells went on a boating trip with a group of people, went on a boating trip with a group of white people. He was the only black person. And he was seen speaking with a white woman. Then his phone ends up missing and with another friend, and he disappears. And his parents were frantic, contacting the friends looking for him. And then his body is found the next day from an apparent drowning. And then according to the police, the case was closed. It was just accidental drowning until the family calls for an independent autopsy, and a whole lot more was discovered. And now the FBI is involved. Now, all these people, I started reading, started responding about what happens when they're the only black person surrounded by white people and how they all almost died. Usually around water. Why that is, I don't know. Could just be people bandwagoning. Is it scandal? Is it conspiracy? Now, there are a bunch of white guys who go to my church. I'm just saying, who probably all know that I can't swim. I think it's psychological. I blame colonialism. The colonists came to the motherland like, hey, America's hiring. Who wants to get paid? And we all get on the boat and they hoodwink us. Like, hey, these chains and shackles are seatbelts, so you don't fall off in the boat and into the shark-infested waters and drown. And now we don't swim. See, white people be slick like that. Continue with that story time. When I was 7 or 8 years old, one summer, I visited my older sister. Why I say all my family's older than me, but my older sister in Virginia Beach. They all lived in Virginia Beach. But she lived in a development called Thalia Gardens. And I remember some older white people, like 17 or 18, asked me if I wanted to drink some blue stuff, a blue drink. And it was like a can of blue paint. And they were like, it's good. You don't want to drink it? We're drinking it. Look at our blue tongues. It's so cool. And they had blue tongues. And the Smurfs had been off for TV for a while, so I thought maybe these were like descendants of Gargamel and finally ate some Smurfs. But they trying to coax me into drinking like blue paint. A child to drinking blue. I don't know if paint is poisonous. But they could say, you want to drink some? I was like, nah, I'm not thirsty, I was quick with it, like, even as a kid, And I'm not bitter, But I'm always skeptical. And people say, whoa, how come you get along so well with Elder Josh? Well, that's different. Because Josh is black. See, he got all y'all fooled, Because he's not funny, right?
Another battle.
Because he's not funny and he's skinny and he wears glasses, He's like Raj from What's Happening, And don't you dare say that makes you rerun by comparison. Shut up. I'll fight all of y'all. But you want further proof that Josh is black? You ever see Josh dancing and no one's laughing? There you go. That's all the proof. Obviously, he's not white. Josh is black. You know, his full name is Joshua Jerome Aloysius Leroy, but today with a name like Joshua Leroy, you know, he shortened it in order to get job interviews. And people would say, you guys are always joking on each other, or either the jokes are always one-sided with you two. And that's not true. It's just that no one remembers the stuff that Josh says because it's not funny. But I digress. How's the old saying go? Oh, we're very old, dear, and very dear and old for friends. Like I'm very dear to him. He's very old to me. But I'm already been doing like the Mike from Soul Cry is so strong bit. Don't tell me I'm going to have to start doing an Elder Josh segment now, am I? Elder Josh is so old. How old is he? Elder Josh is so old that he knew Uncle Ben when Ben's sister was still just only pregnant. Shotgun wedding, you know. They started throwing rice and Uncle Ben saw it and it was like, hey. As a matter of fact, Elder Josh is so old that back in the day, his Timberland boots didn't have laces. They had buckles. But by being so old, Elder Josh was able to gain valuable insight and wisdom. And he was smart enough back then to copyright and patent coal. Elder Josh is so old that growing up, his cartoons were stick figures. You know, those silent movie reel cameras would have to get real close to the books as someone flipped the pages. But Elder Josh is an upstanding citizen. New York, all you see is people hopping the buses, right? Josh never did that. And would have been a lot easier for him because back then they had trolleys. And I'm not saying that Elder Josh grew up Amish, you know. That was just considered modern for America back then, you know. And Elder Josh actually grew up in one of the most modern, innovative homes. He was the first in his family, first in the state to have electric candles. I mean, nowadays they call them light bulbs, but still, you know. And see, to me, I have to be careful as a comedian because people have said I'm too insensitive, and all because I made a little joke long ago about how Josh fell off the wagon once, you know. And they said that was going too far. Not that Josh drank or had an addiction or anything, but just that growing up, cars wasn't invented then. And and when he fell, he hit his head. But I know it's too traumatic, I guess. In nature, when the grass clowns the soil, it says, you're so old, you're as old as Josh. And finally, I want to say that Elder Josh has such a good heart. He's only had one minor verbal snafu in his life in Boston with Paul, you know. Josh, always trying to be helpful, tried to endearingly call over those red cap valets that all started appearing and asked them to come over to help Paul secure his horse. And let the record show that it was Paul who caught an attitude and yelled, Josh, you idiot, the redcoats are coming, the redcoats are coming, you know, making all this racket, waking people up, trying to sleep. But let me not lose train of thought, because it's very easy to get distracted in New York, you know, and life in general, because this was about a retreat initially, but I can't say that I took that literally. Because I said from the jump, I'm not going to go. From work commitments to pet dependency to the constant trying to overrule my verdict by keep asking, almost like they're trying to coerce and force their agenda on me, you know. Why is me saying no not good enough for you, you know? I've started thinking like Luke 11, because it's not like Luke 11, 5-13. Where the friend asks for food for a guest in the middle of the night and keeps petitioning until he gave in. You know, that person, albeit sleeping, was already home and doing nothing. So he could actually do it because he has no commitment. I have a commitment. It's called work. My job is almost like a toll booth clerk on a bridge. If I don't show up, no one can get in and out. Which gets us back to the heart of the matter and what's on my mind, which becomes the crux of the matter. Two vital parts of humans, heart and mind. They work with each other, but can also contradict each other. They say sometimes you have to get out of your comfort zone. And then they say, hey, sometimes you got to stay in your own lane. So which is it? See, it's hard to find the middle ground. So I must trust in the Lord overall, for he is the first and the last. For instance, I'll give you an example. First and the last. Hebrews 4:12. The first part reads, for the word of God is alive and active. And the last part, it judges the thoughts and attitudes of the heart. Our opinion and concepts have become an attitude. For the Bible says, judge not, yet ye be judged. But we tend to judge ourselves and our own actions. Folks, we cannot redeem ourselves. Only he can. Isaiah 53:6. We all, like sheep, have gone astray. Each of us has turned to our own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. You know what's confusing? When you start to believe yourselves, believing your actions because it makes sense to you. Doesn't make sense. It's idolatry, group idolatry, self-idolatry, whatever. Trust me, there's going to be another podcast about that. But you can get caught up in your own reasoning and explanations. Like I was reading John 8 and something stood out as never before that I never realized before recently. So I didn't even think I was going to add it to this podcast, but it's just something that stood out. And it's like, I don't know if it was the denial or the audacity, but in John 8:31-33, Jesus said, you hold to my teaching. If you hold to my teaching, you are really my disciples. And in verse 32, then you will know the truth and the truth will set you free. And the Pharisees almost had a heart attack, had a serious problem with that. I don't know about what they said. I don't know if it was just a Freudian slip. Probably not, because Sigmund Freud didn't exist then. But they had the gall to reply with this. John 8:33, they answered him, we are Abraham's descendants and have never been slaves of anyone. How can you say that we shall be set free? Wait, hold up. You have never been slaves? Really? So we're saying, so you was just independent contractors for Pharaoh. Well, do you not remember your ancestors who wandered the wilderness for 40 years and had the gall to say, we are descendants of Abraham? What? And Esau too, apparently, right? It is pride that you don't want to admit to bondage and slavery. Deuteronomy 13:10. Lord thy God, which brought thee out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage. As slavery. The message the Lord gave was, let my people go. Who else could say that? You independent contractors think you had a shop steward? A union rep? A union rep does not say that. The Lord and only the Lord could command to let my people go. The union rep could only say they have earned enough PTO. It's a difference. It's not the same. For them to say that is to deny his work. The gall. And gall, two different meanings. Gall, bitterness. They try to give him the drink. And we saying gall, it's a hard thing to swallow, right? And when you think about it, which if you're already denying his son, yay, you're just being true to yourself. Because it gets even better. So John 8:42, Jesus said to them, if God were your father, you would love me. Because they said, God is our father. John 8:42, Jesus said to them, if God were your father, you would love me. For I have come here from God. I have not come on my own. God sent me. Now, if I could be a witness to 2 times in the Bible, The first one, obviously, is when Jesus returned from the grave and visited. I want that last month. From when he came to when he ascended. That's been the one time. That's probably number one. What I'd want to witness. But the second thing I would probably want to witness would be that discussion what John speaks about in the Pharisees, especially in John 8:44, when Jesus told the Pharisees, "You are of your father, the devil, and the desires your father you want to do." Like, what? If that would happen today, especially in New York, the crowd, like, ooh, yo, yeah. That is something I would want to witness. It'd be bananas. You are of your father, the devil. I get amped every time I read that part, that part in the chapter. Because it reminds me of Bill Cosby's funniest bit ever. I know. Why bring up Bill Cosby? I know. I'm just saying. It brings me back to that bit. It's the funniest thing he ever says. Now, people have their things. He has a lot of classic bits, the Fat Albert skits, the Noah's, the 3 parts, Chicken Heart, Childbirth, Chocolate Cake. But his funniest bit ever is called "To My Brother Russell, Whom I Slept With." If anyone disagrees, you need to be drug tested. But the bit was about his parents always trying to get Bill and his little brother Russell to go to bed, and they kept playing around, not going to sleep, causing a ruckus, and how his father had to keep running in there, threatening to use the belt, and discovering all the chaos that they did, and every time they come up, Bill would come up with different lies explaining what happened. He'd be like, "Oh, why is the bed wet?" "Well, this man climbed in the window and he came with a pitcher of water and said, 'Don't throw the water.' He threw the water, and then he ran out the window right before you came." This scene is like, "Oh, how did the bed get break? The man, he came in the window, he started jumping on the bed, we said stop, and he ran, and then it's funny, you really want me to believe that?" "Yeah, the man came in the window, Dad." And so this just kept happening, and it's like a 15-minute bit. They actually named his album after that bit. That's how funny the bit is. But getting to the part that I'm talking about. The scene is Bill is mad at his brother for snitching on him for eating extra Jellos. And there's back and forth banter. And the sullen Bill was like, "Well, who made you the big Jello sheriff of the house?" And his brother, well, you already had 2 Jellos and they was about to take away my Jello." "I don't care. I don't want you touching me." "I'm not touching you." But then Bill comes with this thing. It's like, "Well, I am older than you, and I know that you were not born here. You were brought here by the police, who said, 'Take care of him until he has started lying. And I'm going to call the police and tell them you have lied and you are going to go back to jail.'" And Russell was this little kid whimpering about to cry. And like, I don't know what you're talking about. No police brought me here. They are my mother and father." "Hey, no, they ain't. The police are your mother and father." So now I keep picturing like the Pharisees saying that God is our father, and the Savior saying, "No, he ain't. The devil is your mother and father." This would be better than Maury, And Jesus is like, "Oh, the results are in." And of course, they didn't have envelopes back then, so you probably see Romans coming in with a chest. And they open the chest, and he pulls out a scroll. He's like, "And the results of the Pharisees being children of God, the result says he is not your father." And they just see all the chaos start crawling, and people start booing, and the Pharisees getting upset and running around the Sanhedrin, or running around the Mountain of Olives. That would be, what a sight to be seen. But let not what is seen be what you seek. Seek him, seek wisdom always. Your experience cannot be the determining factor in what you do and what is supposed to be done in you, because it would be about you and not him. Trust in him always. And I know people would say, "Oh, so then this means the next time we have a retreat, then you're going to attend then." Heck no. Anyway, I'm out.